And now, your feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled TIFF review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rorabeck. Alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchen.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
Day one, buddy. Day one.
The adrenaline's pumping. I didn't get much sleep last night. I was like Al Pacino in Insomnia, just, staring out of a window. Except, it wasn't in Alaska and it wasn't always sunny. It was just,
It was in dystopian Saskatchewan.
No, definitely not.
Yes, it is day one of the 2021 Toronto International Film Festival, at least the morning before Eric and I head out to a couple screenings. We will be covering the entirety of the Toronto International Film Festival. We already have a couple reviews up that you guys can check out for Memoria and T10. We'll be covering the entire festival on podcast services, on Untitled Movie Reviews, and right here on YouTube. So if you want to hit subscribe, hit that notification bell, you'll be getting 20 to 30 plus reviews over the next, week and a half, 2 weeks, or even further.
That Dear Evan Hansen review is going to come in hot.
That's coming tonight, baby. Probably right when we get home. So opening night. But today we are reviewing Danis Goulet's Night Raiders, a Canadian film that is playing the festival that previously played Berlin earlier this year. Eric, let's just get right into it. What is Night Raiders?
Yeah, so I'll just give this the elevator pitch, and I mean, you kind of set it up nicely. This is Danis Goulet's feature-length directorial debut. She used to be a programmer at TIFF, and also is a former director of the Imagination Film Festival. This is a Imaginative. Pardon me. She is the writer-director here, and what she has done is created a sort of sci-fi dystopian thriller in the vein of Orwellian sort of aesthetic from the point of view of two indigenous characters, a mother and daughter, as they kind of try to survive a world in which a federal academy is capturing children under the age of 18 and basically assimilating them into a military complex. And it's to do with sort of the ideas of resilience, and also looking how history is cyclical. Even though this takes place in a futuristic setting, it has a lot to do with the idea of
colonization and residential schools.
Yeah. and it's all there on a kind of surface level. And there's some things there that I really do respect when it comes to the idea of making a science fiction epic and sort of world building. And anybody that takes that on, whether it be an independent production or a big mainstream studio movie, it's always hard to kind of basically encapsulate a world in one movie, especially when the film is short. This is a Canadian New Zealand co-production, and you see
executive produced by Taika Waititi.
Yeah, and some of it was shot in New Zealand, some of it was shot in Saskatchewan. You see a kind of world where I think when it works best, you see the chaos and sort of loss of innocence on the peripheries than you do sort of in the main frame. And when it comes to some of the CGI or the augmentation of special effects, it's a little bit dodgy. And I would say
I think its ambition kind of
exceeds the execution. And it definitely feels like it's one of those movies that it does have a lot to say. And again, you are incredibly grateful to have that experience and watching something that is using genre in a way to sort of mix metaphor. But overall, its ambition exceeds its modest sort of production, and I think that's what ultimately sort of hurts some of the third act structure, which feels like, I don't know if it came down to editing or even sort of reworking the script, but there are moments where there are setups and payoffs or lack thereof payoffs that don't work or feel like they were going for something that never fully explored. And the film that it reminds me of, I don't know if you felt this way, so maybe we can do a countdown and see if we were thinking.
I don't know if we're
going to
be on the same one, but
let's see. I mean, it'll still be interesting on the count of three.
I mean, you could name before this, you could name any young adult movie from the mid 2000s onward, and I feel like you'll kind of
Right.
get at least an element of this. Anyways, 3, 2, 1. Hunger
Children of
Games.
Men.
Children of Men too. Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, Amanda Plummer is in the is in this movie and also in the Hunger Games
Yeah.
sequels. But it also reminded me of Children of Men, where you see again in the background, you know, refugees being
Yeah.
sort of
I
imprisoned,
get
and
what you're
even the
saying.
way that Amanda Plummer's character is played, she's almost like
I went
Michael
more the young
Caine.
adult territory than Children of Men, but yeah,
Yeah.
I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that film was released 15 years ago, and it's still as you
Oh,
know.
it rocks. It
Well,
rules.
no, it's not just a great movie, but it still has a power to it. Like, it feels
Very
as
relevant
poignant,
still.
yeah, and
Yeah.
relevant as it was 15 years ago as it is
And I
today.
think this movie, the themes that it's covering that we mentioned, like colonization, residential schools, the cyclical nature of just the, shittiness of, government in North America and stuff like that, I think is really interesting. And we've said it before that using genre and whether it's sci-fi or horror or whatever, post-apocalyptic, dystopian kind of thing as like playing with those themes with these, bigger social kind of commentary things is interesting, and I like the concept of that. I just think in the execution that you mentioned surface level that like I get what it's saying. It is there, it's very kind of blunt and overt, but I don't think it necessarily kind of nails that or goes into like anything deeper than just kind of displaying it for you. And I think that was maybe one of my biggest issues with it. And like overall, I think it's mostly fine. I think it's pulling from a lot of the tropes of that dystopian young adult kind of genre over the, like I said, over the last kind of 15 years or stuff. I just don't think any of it stuck with me. And then some of the performances, I kind of couldn't get behind. A little rough around the edges to the point where I couldn't kind of get invested in the characters or the setting, which is mostly like most people are okay, but like the young girl in the movie, like even from the moment she gets that kind of bear trap on her ankle in the very beginning, I'm just like, oh, she's not selling this very well. And I
The
hate
effect
like,
itself is actually quite
yeah,
good, though.
sure. But from that moment on, I felt like any dramatic moment in the movie was just I couldn't buy into it just based on the performances. And then we talked a little bit about the CG, and it's a Canadian film, New Zealand co-production, lower budget. So sometimes I think when you have these big, ambitious kind of ideas that we're going to have, these drones that follow people around that are tracking people, surveillance and like attacking people, that like sometimes I feel like if you don't have the budget for that, sometimes you need to kind of come up with something a little bit more creative or something that works within your budget. Where I felt like, to me personally, none of those effects really worked very well. And it looked like I was watching that kind of, CBC or Sci-Fi Network, like afternoon special kind of movie thing. And like, and that just again takes me out of it, where I feel like if you have a lower budget, I think the setting is cool, and you mentioned it, like the look of everything,
It's
like from the
dreary, it's
actual
gray, it has a sort of Soviet Union era
yeah.
look, because the idea of this story being a dystopian world, in the intro of the film, and as the story progresses, and something I actually kind of like is that it doesn't necessarily spoon feed you sort of
What
the
happened
world
and
and
stuff, yeah.
this kind of like civil war that broke out. You have to kind of learn about it as you go on, in the same way that, like, you know a lot of indigenous filmmakers aren't going to spoon feed or force feed you to learn about the atrocities that have
Yeah.
happened in North America. You need to learn about this yourself, and you need
Mhm.
to, educate yourself on it, and you can listen and learn from those who have had
Absolutely.
those experiences, but it's important for you to, get out there and read and learn and understand what happens. And I feel like this movie is making a point of not necessarily
Oh,
trying to
totally.
give you everything right
And I
away,
know we
even
said
though it's familiar. It is very
yeah,
familiar. Like, even
familiar,
something
and we
like,
said surface level, but I feel like at least it being that way, you can kind of look into these things after and understand kind of what Danis is kind of portraying in the movie. Like you said, it's displaying them for you, but it's up to you to go back and go, okay, I see what this movie's doing, and hopefully not introduces, but
well, it
anyway.
introduces a lot of stuff that almost feels like either this is setting up maybe some sort of franchise or series, because there's stuff that, like, again, another filmmaker that it reminded me of a little bit is Neil Blomkamp's first couple of movies, where you have District 9 and
Mm-hmm.
Elysium, especially with like the Elysium stuff of, characters wanting to, enter a utopian society. They keep
Mm-hmm.
talking about the Emerson state in this movie, and the idea that like people live there, have a better life than the world
Well,
that
that's
they're
why
inhabiting.
the Hunger Games stuff, like, yeah, there's no tournament of kids, but kids are, obviously kidnapped by the government here and put into, these schools, and they're teaching them to fight for them, and
Brainwashed.
then brainwash them, and then also like you mentioned, like this other district that you can go live in, that the wealthy live in, or that's supposed to be much better than what you're in. So yeah, I think, I mean, Maze Runner, any young adult kind of, the government are assholes movie.
But even like 1984 as
Yeah,
well, right?
God, you can go back even further, but I just mean that, like, it really does feel like one of those young adult movies, and not a horrible one by any means. I just don't think it clicked with the performances and the CG. And, I understood what it was displaying for me, but I don't feel like it went deep into those themes, that it kind of ended up just being kind of okay for me, and lowering on the mixed negative to mixed positive for me. So, and I agree with you that, like, it does seem like maybe something that you might see pop up on CBC or something as a series, or something, if this gets a half decent reception. But yeah, I don't know, I'm a little mixed on it. I wasn't too hot on it.
Yeah, I feel the same way, where again, I appreciate the ambition and
Hmm.
what it is saying, and everything that it is saying I agree with, and the idea of like even just losing your culture.
Yeah.
You see Nishka, played by Ellie Maya Tailfeathers. She can understand some of the dialect, but she can't really sort of have these conversations with the elder generation, and
Yeah.
so I think that that's something as well. And the idea of like Western culture just consuming everything and poisoning the land, and again,
Hmm.
these metaphors and references to what is going on in North America in terms of the indigenous population is you know
Very
apt
relevant,
and
yeah.
important to discuss, whether it be in a documentary or a coming of age film or
Absolutely. Yeah.
sci-fi or genre in general. And I think genre is a great space to explore these themes and ideas and do it in a heady way, and you can't help but respect what Goulet is doing here, even though, as we have mentioned, the ambition outweighs sort of the execution of what the movie is. Especially in that third act, where it just kind of feels like it's setting up certain things that don't have these payoffs.
Payoffs. Yeah.
And Tailfeathers is a great filmmaker in her own right. I mean, she worked on a film a few years ago as a co-director and co-creator, called "The Body Remembers When the World Broke Open," which Ava DuVernay's company picked up for U.S. distribution. And actually, Violet Nelson, who was her co-star in that film, also has a small role in this. So again, there's a lot of things to really respect and admire, and I will always
Absolutely. Yeah.
appreciate a Canadian film taking these big swings and doing something really
Absolutely.
interesting
Yeah.
than watching something that is just a documentary about nature.
Yeah. Or even some other young adult kind of schlock that's not really even trying to say anything. That's just, there. Yeah. I totally agree with you on every point. So I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5.
Yeah,
I
I'm also
think.
going to give it a 3 out of 5.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening. We'll be covering the entirety of the Toronto International Film Festival, like I mentioned. So right here on YouTube, please hit subscribe, hit that notification bell. You'll get all of our reviews over the next week and a half to 2 weeks. If you prefer an audio version, or you're listening to the audio version, you're already in the right spot. Untitled Movie Reviews. To find everything we're doing, you can head over to our Letterboxd, which is Untitled_Movies. Our Letterboxd HQ will have all of our ratings, our reviews, our YouTube videos, links to our social handles, links to Eric and I's personal handles, all that kind of jazz. So you guys can head over there. That's all I'm going to plug for now, because that's all we're doing over the next 2 weeks. So we will have a smattering of other reviews, like Kate on Netflix and things like that, maybe Card Counter, different things. But you'll just see those pop up on Untitled Movie Reviews and YouTube as well. So thank you all for listening. As always, my name is Matt Rorabeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at untitledmoviepodcast.com, right here on YouTube, podcast services. And you can follow me on all of those social medias at Matt Rorabeck.
And I'm Eric Marchen. You can find more of my video reviews at rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Happy TIFFmas.